14 white men carved up Africa without a single African in the room. Between November 15, 1884, and February 26, 1885, in a conference room in Berlin, your continent was divided like a birthday cake. Not one African voice. Not one African representative. Not one African present to defend the motherland. What you're about to discover will shatter everything you think you know about how Africa became colonized. Because this wasn't just a meeting, this was the greatest heist in human history, and they've spent 140 years making sure you never learn the full truth. Picture this: Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor of Germany, hosting 13 other European powers in his palace. Britain's Lord Granville. France's Baron de Corso. Portugal's Marquis de Pennefil. King Leopold II's representatives from Belgium. These men sat around polished mahogany tables, sipping wine, while drawing lines across maps of a continent most had never seen. But here's what they don't teach you in school: Africa wasn't some empty wilderness waiting to be claimed. When these Europeans were drawing their arbitrary borders, the Ashanti Empire in Ghana controlled trade routes worth billions in today's currency. The Kingdom of Buganda in Uganda had a parliament system that would make modern democracies jealous. The Ethiopian Empire under Menelik II commanded armies that would later crush Italian forces at Adawa. The Sokoto Caliphate stretched across what's now Nigeria, controlling territories larger than the German Empire itself. These weren't primitive societies. These were sophisticated civilizations with complex political systems, advanced agriculture, thriving universities, and trade networks spanning continents. Timbuktu's Sankore University had 25,000 students when Oxford had barely 1,500. The Kingdom of Congo had diplomatic relations with Portugal since 1482, treating Europeans as equals, not masters. Yet in Berlin, none of this mattered. Article 34 of the Berlin Act stated that any European power could claim African territory simply by notifying other European powers and establishing effective occupation. Effective occupation, imagine the audacity. Your ancestors, who had built kingdoms and managed complex societies for millennia, were suddenly required to prove their right to exist on their own land. Leopold II of Belgium walked away with the Congo Basin, 2.3 million square kilometers, 80 times the size of Belgium. He called it his personal property. Personal property. A territory larger than Western Europe, home to millions of people, rich in ivory, rubber, and later discovered to hold vast mineral wealth including diamonds and uranium. Under his rule, the Congolese population would be cut in half through forced labor, mutilation, and systematic murder. The British claimed the lion's share, from Egypt to South Africa, creating a continuous corridor of British control. They carved up the Ndebele Kingdom, split the Buganda territories, and drew borders that intentionally separated ethnic groups while forcing traditional enemies together. This wasn't accidental, it was strategic. Divide and conquer perfected into an art form. France took the western regions, establishing what they called French West Africa and French Equatorial Africa. They imposed French language, French currency, French law on civilizations that had their own rich languages, economic systems, and legal traditions dating back centuries. But here's the part that should make your blood boil: they knew exactly what they were doing. The conference minutes, preserved in European archives, reveal calculated discussions about how to prevent African unity. They deliberately drew borders to separate the Yoruba people between Nigeria and Benin. They split the Hausa across Niger and Nigeria. They divided the Somali people among 4 different colonial territories. This wasn't ignorance, this was surgical precision designed to ensure Africa could never unite as one powerful entity. They had studied our kingdoms, mapped our trade routes, documented our military capabilities. They knew that united, Africa was unstoppable. So they made sure we would never be united again. The Berlin Conference established the legal framework for the scramble for Africa. Within 20 years, 90% of the continent would be under European control. Ancient trade routes that had connected African civilizations for centuries were redirected toward European ports. Wealth that had circulated within African economies for generations began flowing toward London, Paris, Berlin, and Brussels. They renamed our cities, erased our borders, imposed their languages, and then wrote history books that painted us as the beneficiaries of civilization rather than its victims. They called it the civilizing mission, while systematically destroying civilizations older than Rome. Today, 140 years later, many of those arbitrary borders still define African nations. The conflicts, the economic challenges, the political instability, much of it traces back to that room in Berlin where 14 men decided they owned the world. You are the descendant of kings and queens whose kingdoms these men casually erased from maps. Your ancestors built libraries while Europe burned books. Your heritage includes civilizations that thrived for centuries before European ships ever touched African shores. The truth they've been hiding isn't just about the past, it's about who you are today. When you follow Ponolens, you're not just learning history, you're reclaiming your birthright as heir to the greatest civilizations this world has ever known.